I had a dream last night. It was the kind that seems real right up to the point where you wake up. Something so strange about it. Certain things were really strange about it. But it never occurred to me that it might not actually be happening. I'm still not prepared to say that it didn't happen. I'm not spiritual, and I don't really understand stuff like that. I just feel like I've been somewhere, and now I'm back. And I know something happened when I woke up. I think while I was asleep too. I went to bed last night with a strange feeling. We all remember times when we felt like we were being watched. But this was more than that. I felt like there was someone there with me. But still, I couldn't keep from falling asleep. I don't exactly remember the beginning of the dream. The first thing I recall was staring at my house and walking. All of my neighbours' houses were gone. I was heading down a long empty road, and there was no one around but me. I don't remember what I had been doing at my house beforehand, but I may have been there a while before I started walking. I recall feeling a strong urge to walk. I felt okay walking down that road, though it was cold and dark, and I felt a little lost. But I wasn't afraid, not like I had been in my room. The road changed after a while. It had been straight and nondescript the whole time. But eventually, I reached a bend and then a fork. When I reached the fork, I wasn't alone anymore. A familiar voice called out to me from the side of the road. "It's good to see you." The voice whispered, "I'm just sorry to see you here." I turned to face the voice, knowing who I would see. It was my old friend from my childhood, someone I hadn't seen in years. He looked just a little different from how I remembered him, but not by much. He was older than when I saw him last, obviously, but he seemed at least a few years younger than me somehow, even though we're supposed to be the same age. He was also very pale, unbelievably white in fact, and he had deep circles around his eyes that was solid blue, as were his lips. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I'm here to warn you." Naturally, I was all ears. "There's a man in your house right now," he explained. "What do you mean there's someone in my house?" "I was just there. I think. I didn't actually know how long ago I had been there. I wasn't sure how long I had been walking. You don't understand. He's really in your house right now." I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was curious. "Who is he?" I asked him. "He's the cold man. He comes to people at night when they're afraid." The cold man? I'd never heard of anyone like that before. I wanted to know more. So I asked, "What does he do?" "He waits to be noticed. Then he makes his move." You know that chill you feel on your back when something really scares you? That's not just nerves. That's him standing behind you. What for? I wondered. What does he do once you notice him? My friend looked down and away. He wouldn't answer that question. Just don't let him in. What do you mean? He can be close forever. My friend explained. He'll walk around your house at night and even stand in your room while you're asleep. Like he is in yours right now. He can know where you are. He can even be looking at you. But he won't find you unless you let him in. How does he find you? I mean, how do you let him in? My friend looked to either side of the road like he was worried that someone might overhear. He leaned in very close and whispered, "If you see him, if you hear him, or if you ever start to suddenly feel very cold, don't move. Don't talk to him. Don't acknowledge him. Don't ever let him in." I don't understand, I admitted. How do I get rid of him? You can't. My friend replied in a small, shuddering voice. Look, I'm out of time. Out of time, I repeated, not sure what he meant exactly. My friend shook his head. His eyes were wide and he was shivering. Off in the distance, I noticed a dark figure creeping up behind him. But something kept me from speaking. My time is up. Don't let him in. And whatever you do, don't answer it. Something pulled my friend into the darkness, and suddenly, I couldn't see him anymore. Before, I could follow after him, though I was startled awake by a loud noise. I was sitting in my room, fully dressed with my shoes on. I could swear that I wasn't dressed when I went to bed. My shoes and legs were covered in dust. My feet were sore, and I could hear a ringing noise right next to me. In the confusion of waking up from such a vivid dream, I didn't immediately recognize it. I felt so cold. Then I looked down and saw my phone. That was the source of the ringing. Remembering my friend's words, I didn't answer it. Eventually, it stopped ringing. The room was cold as ice. The feeling that I was being watched was as strong as it could have been when I had fallen asleep. I could hear something inside my closet, but I dared not move. I just closed my eyes and waited. Eventually, I heard footsteps walking away. Still inside from the closet, it was as if they were walking down some unseen hallway. Though my closet is small, and I couldn't see anything unusual in there. When the footsteps got far enough away, the cold lifted. He didn't get in this time. If my dream was true, if the thing in my closet was who I think it was, I must never let him in. I think he'll be back tonight though. That's when he's supposed to come, as my friend told me. I don't know what happened to my friend. I just hope people will remember his warning. If you start to feel cold while reading this, don't be alarmed. If you hear something in your house, just ignore it. You can't afford to let him find you. Don't let the cold man in. I'm not going to try to argue that it's normal to take a cold bath at 4 a.m. It's not. But it's been my experience in life that everyone has their strange little habits. I mean, given the things I've seen some people do when left to their own devices, Jack's was actually pretty mundane. For example, mine is coffee. I drink gallons of this stuff, and at really odd hours. I'll be wide awake until the sun comes up. But not because I'm some kind of insomniac. Not really. I just fell into a destructive cycle. Get bored, drink coffee. Starting a new book. Make coffee first. Movie marathon with Jack. I'll fix us each a coffee. Exhausted at work because I didn't sleep for more than an hour last night. Better grab a coffee on the way. You get the picture. Anyhow, I was staring at my ceiling, wide awake. My bedside clock displaying 03:51 in fat orange digits. From across the hall, I heard a door click open, and then the pad of bare feet on the carpeted landing. Jack was embarking on his nightly jaunt to the tub. I had work in 5 hours, so I tried to suppress the urge to intercept my fellow night owl for a cup of the black gold instead. I wedged my head between 2 pillows so that the dull throb of my heartbeat filled my ears like pulsing music, building towards a crescendo, far from soothing my worries and lulling me to sleep. I found that listening to my own heartbeat just made things worse. I was counting the thumps, trying to figure out whether or not the beating was irregular, or if I was simply whipping myself into a panic and causing my heart rate to raise by itself. As the thought crossed my mind, I felt a desire to unwind for the comfort that comes with wrapping one's hands about a warm beverage. Coffee. Sweat crept up my back like a clammy hand, and when I glanced at the clock, I realised, with some dismay, that only 4 minutes had passed. So I sat up, threw on my dressing gown, and you guessed it, wandered down to the kitchen, the ghost of that familiar aroma already filling my nostrils. As the spoon clinked inside the cup, I noticed the sound was offset by another, a low baritone voice from the adjoining bathroom. Just Jack singing, I told myself. But this was not quite a song. There was no melody to it, just a repetitive rhythm. I'd have thought it to be some kind of looped recording, perhaps playing from Jack's phone. But for occasional variations, intermingled with it, too, was a sighing, like the hiss of steam when you submerge a hot pan in cold water. Chant, chant, hiss, and so on. I laughed it off, but as I went to leave the room, I noticed that the boiler, which was fitted just outside the bathroom door, facing the kitchen, was switched off. I could plainly hear the gurgle of taps in the bathroom, but the bath must have been ice cold. I knocked on the door. "Hey Jack, you want me to turn the hot water on?" No reply. The chanting continued. He mustn't have heard me. If he wasn't aware that the water was cold, he soon would be, as soon as he dipped his toe into the tub. Most likely. I smiled at the thought and returned to my room. Despite the caffeine burning its way through my system, I managed a solid 3.5 hours sleep and rose from my bed with time for either a shower or a coffee before I had to set off. I picked the shower, knowing I could grab a coffee from the shop on the corner by my office. But when I got to the kitchen, my feet splashed down into 1/2 inch of cold water, shimmering atop the tiled floor. I dared not try any of the lights or kitchen appliances, so I fumbled my way across the gloomy room to the bathroom door and hammered on it. Even as I did, I realized, in a moment of stinging terror, that the chanting was still happening, albeit in a more feeble, exhausted voice. There was a light coming from under the door too. Bright, electric light that made white prisms in the murky bathwater. "Jack, are you in there?" The weak chanting continued, but the hissing had abated. I grabbed the door handle and threw all my weight behind my shoulder as I turned it, simultaneously shoving it open, squinting with eyes unaccustomed to the light. And there he was, Jack, lying in the bathtub, facing the door, his mouth moving, reciting things I could barely even hear anymore, and his face crumpled with fatigue. The water spilling over the top of the bath was a reddish brown, and as I stumbled forward, I saw why. Fanning out across the surface of the water were Jack's organs. All of them. The spools of intestine, the heart that still thudded out little ripples over the bathwater. All of his organs spread out and floating around him, and his mouth still moving in ghastly mimicry of life. In the corner of my eye, wedged between the end of the bathtub and the wall of the shower cubicle, there stood something else too, tall and pale and wrinkled, and watching my flatmate's waterlogged form twitching there in the bath. But I never had time to look at it. My gaze was fixed on the sickening spectacle before me, my stomach turning violently. "Fuck, Jack!" All of this took place in a matter of about 2 seconds. Even as the words left my mouth, the light above me suddenly flared brightly and then popped. The switch from dark to light, then back to dark, all in a matter of a few heartbeats, was too much for my eyes, and I flailed backwards, slipping on the floor as my vision was filled with neon starbursts and silhouettes superimposed atop them. Everything had fallen completely silent. By the time my vision had cleared enough to see, Jack was dead. The rosy apple of his heart bobbed there, a hollow, stationary shell, and his mouth hung loose and wide as bathwater rushed inside to soothe his ruined throat. The open window allowed the warm fingers of a late summer breeze to brush the surface of the water, sending a little wave rolling along its surface. I looked for the man in the corner of the room, but he'd vanished, taking with him whatever strange force of will that Jack had kept chanting. The police were less than helpful. They initially suspected me, and when I finally got a good lawyer, they ruled Jack's death as self-inflicted and closed the case. When I told the detective about the man I'd seen, and Jack still chanting while so grievously wounded, he grimaced and told me that I drank too much caffeine, that the rush of blood to my head was causing my brain to play tricks on me. Then, just like that, I was left alone to pick up the pieces. I had to sort through Jack's things, and I found a reef of unpaid electricity, water and gas bills. For 3 weeks, we had been using double the amount of electricity we normally used, and the billing authorities had threatened to disconnect us from the grid if we didn't pay up. I sorted through them all by lamplight, coffee cooling atop a stack of envelopes, calculator on my lap. We owed hundreds of pounds in utility bills and fines. As I did so, I swore I could hear the pipes gurgling, like someone was using the taps downstairs. But when I ran to check, everything was off. For a time, I became obsessed with the manner in which Jack had died, printing off newspaper articles and listening to archived reports about strange crimes in the area. But there was nothing even close to resembling what I'd seen. I had missed so much work to sleepless nights, I was laid off, and had to enlist the help of my brother and a few friends to pay off the money I owed. Eventually, I moved back in with my parents. I guess it would make more for an engaging tale if I were to tell you that I was haunted by Jack's vengeful spirit. Or that pale thing from that bathroom stalked me wherever I went. But I would be lying if I did so. It's like, between the light going out and the forensics team finally draining that ice-cold water, Jack just ceased to be. His family won't even talk to me, and mine tell me to try and forget everything that happened and move on with my life. But it's just hard, you know? I don't even drink coffee anymore.